Hello. My name is Luna. I'm 76 years old. And I've spent most of my life being what people call the backbone of the family. I was a public school teacher in Asheville, North Carolina. For 34 years, I raised one son, Dylan. Mostly on my own after my husband passed away when Dylan was still in college. I didn't complain. I just did what I had to do like a lot of women from my generation. Tonight was supposed to be special. Dylan and his wife, Jessica, just moved into their new house by Lake Glenville. A beautiful, modern place with high windows, a view of the water, and a big kitchen Jessica kept going on about during construction. I remember the day Dylan showed me the blueprint. He said, "Mom, there's a guest suite on the first floor, no stairs, perfect for you when you visit." And so I helped them. $140,000 to be exact, pulled from my savings, from the inheritance my husband left me, and the retirement I worked hard for. I thought it was the right thing to do. Family helps family. Tonight was supposed to be their housewarming dinner. Dylan had called me just the day before. Excited. "Mom, don't be late. We've got something special planned." I'd already picked out my outfit, a soft navy dress, the kind I always wore to family dinners. Not too formal. Not too casual. Just respectful. I spent an hour getting ready. Even curled my hair a bit. The sun was starting to set, casting this warm golden light into my small apartment. I was just about to put on my shoes when my phone buzzed. I reached for it, expecting a "need anything on your way" or maybe "dinner's running a bit late." But it wasn't either. The message read, "Mom, sorry. Jessica thinks it's best if we have this dinner without you. We'll catch up later." I read it twice. Then a third time. My hands went cold. My chest tightened in that quiet, crushing way that doesn't feel like pain, just emptiness. Jessica thinks it's best. Dinner without me. I sat down on the edge of the couch, still holding the phone. This couldn't be real. Not after everything. Not after the money. The support. The years I poured into making sure they had everything they needed. Not after I helped raise their 2 kids. Watched their dog when they went to Hawaii. Babysat on short notice so Jessica could show a house. Not after I helped pay for that house. My hands trembled. My mouth felt dry. And in that moment, sitting in my apartment, and dressed for a dinner I was no longer welcome at, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: abandonment. And here's the part that hurt the most. I wasn't surprised. Because deep down, I'd seen the signs. The quick visits on holidays. The "oh, sorry, Mom, they were slammed this week." The way Jessica's smile tightened when I offered advice. The way Dylan always said, "She's just stressed." When I mentioned her distance, this text wasn't a one-off. It was just the first time they said the quiet part out loud. And I realized something right then: I wasn't family. I was a resource, an account number, a means to an end. And I was about to do something I should have done a long time ago. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my living room, surrounded by everything I had spent a lifetime building, not just a home, but a history. Every item around me told a story. The oak rocking chair Dylan used to crawl into when he had nightmares. A faded photo of my late husband, Thomas, grinning beside our rust-red Ford truck. A ceramic lighthouse Emily made me in 2nd grade. A quilt stitched from old clothes. Each patch a memory. But all I could think about was that message: not invited, not wanted, by my own son. In a house I helped pay for, somewhere around midnight. I walked to the filing cabinet in my hallway, the one I'd kept meticulously organized since Thomas passed. I opened the drawer, labeled Family Expenses, and pulled out the folders. I had never really looked at them all together before. And what I saw nearly knocked the breath out of me. A spreadsheet of sacrifice. A check for $3. $200 to cover Dylan's car repairs back in 2011. Tuition payments for Emily's private high school. Shuba. $0 for Ethan's coding bootcamp that he dropped out of after 6 weeks. New appliances for Jessica stainless steel. Energy efficient. Top of the line. Club fees for Ethan's soccer league. A down payment for their house by Lake Glenville. Gas money. Insurance. Gifts. Groceries. Even Jessica's real estate license courses. I added it up at least roughly, and the number made me dizzy over $280. Ling. And that didn't count the hours. The babysitting. The weekends spent helping them move, paint, fix broken plumbing. The times I said no to myself so I could say yes to them. I sat there with the papers in my lap and a question burned in my mind. When did helping become expected? When did generosity become obligation? When did love start feeling like a transaction? The answer crept in like a whisper the moment I stopped saying no. I'd wanted to be the mother who always came through. The grandmother who never let them down. I believed that loyalty would be returned with respect, with connection. I thought I was buying love. Or at least preserving it. But now it felt like I'd only been renting their attention and the lease had expired. A notification buzzed on my phone. It was from Emily. Grandma? Are you still coming over tomorrow? I miss you. I stared at the message, feeling tears prick my eyes. At least one person still saw me as something more than a wallet. I typed back slowly, sweetheart. I think your parents have decided I should stay home. A few moments later, another buzz. Wait? What Dad said you had to be there. What happened I didn't answer? Not yet. Instead, I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and made myself a cup of chamomile tea. For the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was clear. Crystal clear. The silence in my apartment no longer felt like loneliness. It felt like clarity. Like space I had forgotten I needed. They had made a choice, one that spoke louder than any apology could ever undo. Now it was time for me to make one of my own. Tomorrow. I'd call the bank. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. No alarm. No noise. Just instinct. I sat at the edge of my bed for a moment. The cool wooden floor pressing against my bare feet. And I knew it was time. I brewed a fresh pot of coffee. Black and strong the way Thomas used to drink it. And sat by the window as the light slowly crept across the mountains. Asheville was quiet at that hour. Still. Honest. By 8:01, I was on the phone with Blue Ridge First Union Bank. Good morning. Mom? This is Amanda speaking. How can I assist you today? My name is Luna Morgan. I said, steady and polite. I'd like to cancel all automatic payments and standing transfers from my checking and savings accounts. Every single one of them. There was a pause. All of them. Ma'am, yes. And I'd also like to revoke power of attorney. It was granted to my son Dylan Morgan. I'll come into the branch this week to sign paperwork. But I want the process started today. Another pause. This one longer? Yes. Mrs. Morgan. We can begin temporary suspension right now and prepare everything for your visit. Good. I said, let's do that. When the call ended, I exhaled. Slowly. Deliberately. Like I'd been holding my breath for the past 2 decades. I walked to the mirror in the hallway and studied the woman looking back at me. Wrinkles. Yes. Gray hair pulled into a bun. Eyes a little softer than they used to be. But there was something new, a flicker of steel behind the softness. I wasn't doing this out of anger. I was doing it out of self-respect. For years, I had given and given and given until I barely recognized who I was without someone else's needs defining my days. I'd told myself it was love, that it was noble, that it was what a mother was supposed to do. But love without boundaries isn't love, it's exhaustion. Later that afternoon, I called Sandra Heller, our family attorney. She had handled Thomas's estate after his passing and always treated me with kindness, not condescension. Luna, it's so good to hear from you, Sandra said. What can I help you with? I want to change my will, I said clearly. And I want to establish a trust, one that protects my assets from being misused. There was no hesitation in her response. Let's schedule an appointment. I'll walk you through every step. By 4:00 p.m. I had a list of what I wanted: a revocable living trust with me as the sole trustee, and amendments to my will, and legal documentation revoking Dylan's access to my accounts. I wasn't being vindictive. I was protecting what was mine. The old Luna, the one who would have second-guessed herself, who would have felt guilty, was gone. Or maybe not gone. Just finally resting. That evening, I turned off my phone. I pulled out a novel I'd been meaning to read for years but never found time for because there was always something more urgent: a last-minute babysitting favor, an emergency loan, to a dinner I had to bring dessert to but wasn't really invited to enjoy. Now, there was nothing pulling me away. Just a woman, her tea, a book, and the kind of silence that didn't feel empty, it felt earned. It didn't take long. 2 days after I canceled the payments and revoked Dylan's access, he showed up at my apartment. No knock. Just a loud, frantic banging on the door, like someone trying to break in or stop a fire. I opened the door slowly. And there he was, my son. Red in the face. Shoulders tight. Breath shallow. Not the boy I raised, but a man who looked inconvenienced. Mom, he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. What the hell is going on? I closed the door behind him. Calm as still water. What do you mean, the bank? He snapped. I got a call saying all the transfers are suspended. My mortgage payment bounced. Jessica's car lease is overdue. Ethan's tuition payment didn't go through, I nodded. Yes. I know. I canceled everything. He blinked. Why would you do that without telling us? I looked at him, really looked. This grown man? A husband. A father. A professional. Still acting like a child who lost his allowance. Because Dylan, I said quietly. You and Jessica made it clear I wasn't part of the family anymore. So I'm done paying to feel like I belong. He scoffed, rubbing his forehead. It's not like that. You're overreacting. Jessica just thought the dinner would be easier without tension. Tension. I raised my eyebrows. You mean me? His silence answered for him. Son, I said, my voice steady but sad. I've helped you more than most parents ever could. I gave what I had and then some. I did it out of love. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like love and started feeling like expectation, like an invoice. He looked at the floor, lips pressed together. Jessica showed up 10 minutes later, wearing her usual tight-lipped smile that never reached her eyes. Luna, we really should talk about this like adults. I turned to her. I agree. I walked to the dining table where I had neatly placed a folder of documents, canceled payments, a copy of the trust paperwork, and a note that read, "This is not revenge. This is release." I handed it to Jessica. She flipped through it, expressions souring with each page. "You're seriously cutting us off. I'm seriously setting boundaries." I replied. From the hallway came Ethan's voice on speakerphone, crackling through Dylan's Bluetooth. "Dad? My card's frozen. I can't check into the hotel." "I'm stuck here," Jessica groaned. "Luna? This is cruel." "No," I said firmly. "Cruel is pretending I'm still family. Only to lock me out of the one place I helped you build. This is clarity." Dylan stared at me. "Quiet now." Jessica shook her head, muttering something under her breath. Neither apologized. They left as suddenly as they came, frustration trailing behind them like smoke from a dying fire. I didn't cry. Not this time. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and poured myself a glass of cold water. My hands were still, my heart no longer racing. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. No more guilt. No more emotional blackmail disguised as family duty. Just a line drawn firm and clear. A line that said, "I will love you, but I will no longer fund your indifference." The next morning, there was a knock at my door. It wasn't loud or angry like Dylan's. It was hesitant. Soft, almost apologetics. When I opened it, I found Emily, my granddaughter, standing there in her oversized hoodie, clutching a paper bag in one hand and her car keys in the other. "Grandma," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Can I come in?" My heart tightened. Of course. "Baby, come on." She stepped inside, her eyes darting around like she was afraid someone had followed her. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said quickly. "She's not really speaking to me right now." I smiled gently and led her to the kitchen. "Tea or coffee?" "Coffee," she replied. "Always coffee." We sat at the table, 2 steaming mugs between us. She reached into the bag and pulled out a small peach cobbler from the bakery downtown. "My favorite. I remembered you used to bring this to every holiday dinner," she said. So I thought, maybe it was my turn. I nodded, blinking back the warmth rising in my chest. "I don't know what's happening with Dad and Mom," she said. "They're acting like you cut them off out of spite." But I read the messages. I know what happened. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. They're saying you betrayed them. But honestly, she looked up at me, eyes wet. "They betrayed you first." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Thank you for saying that." She squeezed my hand back. "You deserve better. You always have." For a moment, we just sat there in silence. The kind that feels like a blanket, warm and safe. Then Emily pulled something out of her backpack, a small photo album she'd put together herself. "I made this for you," she said. "It's all the moments we shared that weren't part of birthday parties or holidays. Just us." I flipped through the pages, a picture of us at the craft fair when she was 8. Her glitter-covered hands proudly holding a paper lantern. Another of her graduation, with me in the background, clapping louder than anyone. A Polaroid from a rainy afternoon when we stayed in, played Scrabble, and made soup. I didn't realize how many little moments we'd had, moments that mattered. "I don't care about the money," she said. "I care about you." And in that instant, I felt it, the thing I had been aching for all this time. Real love. No strings. No transactions. Just connection. It wasn't everyone in the family, but it was someone And sometimes, one person seeing your worth is enough to remind you that you were never invisible to begin with. We spent the afternoon together laughing, remembering, eating warm cobbler on chipped china. Emily told me about her plans for grad school, her new boyfriend, her dreams of traveling through Europe. I listened, really listened, like I hadn't been able to in years, because for once, I wasn't distracted by what I owed or what was expected of me. That night, after she left, I sat by the window again, watching the city lights blink to life. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel forgotten. I felt free. A week passed. The phone stayed quiet. No calls from Dylan. No sudden apologies. No awkward texts from Jessica. Just silence. And for once, it didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space I could finally breathe in. Each morning, I started walking again. Not far, just through the tree-lined streets of my Asheville neighborhood, where the houses sat like old friends and the breeze carried the smell of pine and fresh coffee. I passed the bookstore I used to take Emily to when she was little. And for the first time in years, I walked in. "Good morning," the clerk said warmly. I smiled. "It's been a while. I'm looking for something honest. Something that reminds me who I am." He handed me a memoir by a woman who left everything behind in her 70s and started a new life in Oregon. I chuckled as I flipped through the first few pages. Maybe I'm not the only one. Back home, I cleaned. Not just surface cleaning, the deep kind. The kind where you pull boxes from closets and find old letters, broken jewelry, clothes that don't fit anymore, dreams you meant to chase, but shelved instead. In the back of one drawer, I found a letter from Thomas, one he wrote just weeks before he passed. It was folded carefully, tucked into a worn envelope marked, "For later," in his looping handwriting. I unfolded it with trembling hands. "Luna, if you're reading this, then I'm gone. And I hate that. But if I know you, you're probably taking care of everyone else and forgetting about yourself. Promise me something. Will you? That you'll live. Not just exist. Not just give, but actually live. Laugh. Travel. Fall in love again. Try something new. And if Dylan grows up to be the kind of man who forgets how lucky he is to have you remind him once, just once. After that, let him learn the hard way. You don't owe anyone your soul. Luna. Just your love. And only if they deserve it. I love you forever. T. I read it 3 times before the tears came big. Quiet sobs that shook my shoulders and soaked the collar of my sweater. It was like he had written it for this exact moment. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself feel it all, the anger, the sadness, the relief. I wasn't just a mother. I wasn't just a giver. I was a person. With dreams, grief, joy, and boundaries. That evening, I sat down with my journal, not the one I used to track expenses or grocery lists. This one was leather-bound, untouched. A gift from Emily last Christmas. At the top of the first page, I wrote, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of me." I began listing things I wanted to do, not for anyone else, but for myself. Take a pottery class. Visit Maine in the fall. Learn how to make homemade pasta. Foster a dog. Take Emily to Paris. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point anymore. It was about rediscovering the woman beneath the mother, the girl beneath the grandmother, the human beneath the title. For so long, I had given everyone else a story to live, Now, it was time to write my own. 2 months later, I found myself standing in front of a dusty, sunlit studio tucked between a pottery cafe and a small yoga shop on Biltmore Avenue. A handwritten sign on the door read "Beginner Pottery. All ages welcome. Come as you are." So I did. Inside, the room smelled of clay and dried lavender. There were 8 workstations, a long table with chipped mugs, and a woman in her 50s wearing overalls and a bandana. She looked up from the wheel, her hands gray with damp clay. "You must be Luna," she said with a grin. "Emily told me you might come by." I blinked. "Emily?" The woman laughed. "I'm Joyce. She called last week. Said her grandma needed a new adventure. Said you'd be the one with the best laugh in the room." I smiled despite myself. Well, I guess she was right. That day, I made the ugliest, most lopsided coffee mug anyone had ever seen. And I loved it. There was something raw and honest about shaping clay. It didn't care how perfect you were or how much money you gave away or how many dinners you weren't invited to. Clay met you exactly where you were. Messy. Unfinished. Human. Every Thursday after that, I showed up at Joyce's studio. And little by little, I started reclaiming pieces of myself. Some days we made bowls or vases. Other days, we just talked about heartbreak. Adult children. Starting over in your 60s. Turns out, I wasn't alone. There were women like me everywhere, women who had poured themselves out for their families until they were running on empty corrections. I raised 3 boys. Joyce told me once, wiping her hands on a towel, 2 of them haven't called in years. But this, she held up a crooked but beautiful vase. This is for me. One Thursday, Joyce pulled out a dusty Kyline-fired tile from a back shelf. She handed it to me like a treasure. It read, "She remembered who she was." And the game changed. I read it 3 times. That night, I glued it above my kitchen sink. Not long after, I started doing other small things. I bought a bright red scarf and wore it to the grocery store. I took a weekend drive to Charleston just to eat oysters and watch the boats. I joined a book club and said exactly what I thought, even when no one agreed. I began walking differently, head higher, step steadier. I no longer looked down when someone didn't smile back. I stopped apologizing for taking up space. And the most surprising thing, people started noticing. The woman at the bakery began calling me by name. A man at the bookstore asked if I'd join a local poetry night. The mailman left me a handwritten note saying he loved seeing my porch plants bloom again. One afternoon, I caught my reflection in the window of the coffee shop. I paused. Not because I didn't recognize the woman staring back, but because for the first time in years I did. She wasn't just a grandmother, or a mother, or a helper. She was Luna, full of light, full of story, full of a life not yet finished. And something inside whispered, "This isn't your second chapter. This is your first one." Written in your own handwriting. The first time I posted one of my pottery pieces online, it was just a joke. A crooked little sugar bowl, with a lid that didn't quite fit, glazed in a deep cobalt blue. I called it Imperfect Grace and added a caption, "Made by these 68-year-old hands, who are finally learning to shape joy instead of holding pain." I went to bed and forgot about it. By morning, I had over 100 comments. Women from Kansas to California saying, "This feels like me." A widow in Oregon wrote, "I thought I was too old to start over. But maybe I'm not." Someone tagged a friend and said, "This is what I meant when I said you're stronger than you know." I blinked, staring at the screen. All this from a sugar bowl. That week, I opened a small online shop. I didn't expect much. Just a place to share the little creations that had helped me heal. I named it Luna's Light. Orders started coming in. Slowly at first, then faster. A woman in Vermont bought a vase titled Second Wind. A nurse in Texas ordered 3 mugs glazed with a sunrise and the words, "I am still here." Joyce laughed when I told her, "See, told you your story wasn't finished." What surprised me most wasn't the sales. It was the letters. People weren't just buying pottery. They were sharing their own stories. One woman had just left a toxic marriage after 30 years. Another had lost her mother and felt lost herself. One man said he bought a teacup for his sister, who was finally recovering from depression, because she needed to feel held by something kind. Each message reminded me I wasn't alone. My pain wasn't rare. My healing could help others find theirs. One afternoon, I got an unexpected email from a local gallery in Asheville. They had seen my work online and wanted to feature Luna's Light in a community exhibit titled New Bloom, celebrating artists who found their voice later in life. I sat in my kitchen, rereading the message over and over. Me, a gallery. I thought about the woman I was 6 months ago sitting in silence after being told she wasn't welcome at her own family's table. The woman who believed her value had an expiration date. The one who thought love had to be earned by sacrifice. And I smiled. Because she was gone now. Replaced by a woman who knew her worth didn't depend on anyone else's invitation. A woman who had learned to welcome herself back into her own life. The gallery night was simple but beautiful. Candles. Jazz. Dozens of pieces from artists who had lived, lost, endured, and created beauty from the ashes. I stood next to my little display of pottery bowls, cups, and vases with titles like Letting Go, Still Rooted, and Morning After the Storm. A woman walked up, tears in her eyes. "You're Luna," she asked. "Your piece, Imperfect Grace." It made me call my mom after 4 years of silence. I didn't know what to say, so I just hugged her. Because sometimes, healing isn't loud. Sometimes, it's quiet and handmade. Fired in the kiln of grief and glazed with hope. That night, I walked home alone under a sky full of stars. And for the first time in a long time, I felt full. Not of sadness, not of bitterness, but of something I thought I'd lost: peace.